This is Paul McGuire. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. On today's edition of the Paul McGuire Report, we're going to talk about the global situation in terms of the global economy, which affects the U.S. economy. It affects the European economy, and it affects the economies on just about every continent. Now, as many of you have seen in the media, both here in the United States and all across Europe, there are numerous candidates running for the position of president or the heads of state in various European nations that are running on a populist ticket. In other words, they're breaking rank with the globalist elite that control most of the politicians. And like Donald Trump, they are running on a populist ticket. This seems to be a growing trend, a trend that I have been writing about literally for decades and speaking about for decades, long before people knew that globalism was a problem. I remember in my early books, this was decades ago, I write about globalism and the trade treaties, and people would look at me like I was crazy, like, what are you talking about? But you see, I understood something from research that a lot of people, it just dawned upon them recently, and that is that globalism, all these trade treaties passed by the globalist elite, they have been passed by the globalist elite for the benefit of the globalist elite, not for your benefit or my benefit. We're ripped off. Now, the European Union, the globalist elite use the same sucker punch wherever they do their thing. So, for example, in the European Union, they promised the various people of Europe in the various nations like France and Germany and Great Britain and so on and so forth. The European Union promised them that they would have a much better economy and a much higher standard of living, and everything would be great for them if they would just end the independent nation state and join together, like John Lennon's, the ex-Beatle sang, when the world will be as one, that they should join together, and happy days will be here again when we're all united into a single European superstate. And what happened was the people of Europe quickly discovered that they were ripped off, that their standard of living went down, that they had no right to say anything, that they lost their rights to control their nations. They lost their rights, period. They had to surrender to the dictates of a dictatorial European superstate. They lost religious liberties, and they basically lost everything. And the more egregious examples of this would be Cyprus and Greece, where the people are rioting in the streets and their standard of living has been trashed. Then more recent examples that finally began to wake up the Europeans. Now, for those of you that are listening to me in Europe or one of the European nations, I just want to say something to you. I'm not saying this to you out of, a sense of superiority or disparagement, but the reality is Europe has been very, well, I'm just cut to the chase. Europe and the European nations have been far more socialized than the United States. It's not that the United States is not almost completely on board with the socialist program, because America has been heavily socialized. So we're talking about a matter of degrees. But the fact remains that America is still less socialized than the European Union. And as such, because we're less socialized, when I mean socialized, I'm not talking about, being polite to one another in society. I'm talking about, when I use the term socialized, I mean having embraced a socialist form of government, because America is not along the road as far in terms of socialism as Europe. We still have many, many more freedoms. Oh yeah, they're in jeopardy than the nations of Europe. For example, we have guns, and a lot of Europeans can't figure out why. Well, hey, all I can tell you is remember the history of Europe, and then you might remember why Americans have guns. You know, the only thing standing between you and a full-blown dictatorship is guns. And if you have no guns, then you are going to be slaughtered if a dictator arises. That's the history. And that's relatively recent history in Europe. Just look at Adolf Hitler and look what happened in Russia and so on and so forth. So we have guns. The socialists in America want to get rid of guns because they want total control. We still have a stronger belief in Christianity and the Bible, even though we too are going the way of Europe. We still retain a larger percentage of Bible-believing Christians than Europe has. And we are more nationalistic or more patriotic than Europe is because we have a Bill of Rights and a Constitution in America that's different than the governing documents, let's say, of the French Revolution. So, having said that, we've kind of been on the somewhat high alert against a world socialist government and a one world government. And that's not to applaud us because we're slipping and sliding into the same direction of which you've already arrived. Now, the other thing that has to be said is that in a positive reference towards Europe, because you have felt and experienced the bitter results of entering a socialist society and a European Union, you've experienced to a harsher degree than we have what it's like to have the people like Angela Merkel. Angela Merkel doesn't represent the people of Germany. And the current head of Britain doesn't represent the British people. I mean, come on, man. Those are the candidates that the globalist elite have given you, because they don't care what you think. I read the European press. Angela Merkel doesn't care what you think. She's going to put in militant Islamic extremists from Syria all she wants, and nobody in their right mind would do that if they were truly serving their nations. But you see, the globalist elite wants the Islamic militant males from Syria. They want them in by the hundreds of thousands, because the globalist elite game plan is to shatter and destroy the independent nation state and the social cohesion that an independent nation state, like let's say France or Germany or England, might naturally produce. They want to smash it, and the way they're going to smash it is they're going to deliberately flood the European continent with massive numbers, millions, of militant Islamic extremists, so that they can play the oldest game in the world. Oh, we have chaos in the streets all over Europe, so we now have to give you a dictatorial government. We now will have a European Union army. Listen closely. We now have to have a European Union army and troops patrolling the streets because we have this big Syrian militant Islam problem. But they created the problem on purpose so they could create the solution, which is a standing army in Europe, which means a dictatorship of Europe, a revived Roman Empire, where you essentially live in a military dictatorship called the European Union, and you lose all your rights. and you have surveillance cameras everywhere. Not because you, the individual Europeans, are bad people. You're not. But because they deliberately brought in a crisis in the form of militant Islamic extremists who are raping your women, blowing up buildings, creating massacres, so on and so forth. It's a strategy. It's a Trojan horse. It's planned. And the United States is following in your footsteps. We're just a little bit behind, not that much behind, unless the current president reverses the immigration trend, because our government is now sneaking in huge numbers of militant Islamic males from Syria and other nations that are a very dangerous threat to the United States, because our government, like the heads of your globalist elite government, they want to force in over 1 million Islamic extremists from nations like Syria so they can destroy what's left of the social cohesion of the United States of America and play the same game on us that they're playing on you, which is, oh, now we have a crisis. We have all these militant Islamic males blowing up buildings, raping our women. Well, I guess we're going to have to call for martial law and a police state and standing armies in the streets of America, because after all, we have a crisis, and we need to have a kind of dictatorship to solve the crisis. But again, just like in Europe, it is the globalist elite that deliberately set up the crisis. They created the crisis. They forced you to accept the militant Islamic extremists, just like they're forcing us to accept the militant Islamic extremists. So this is a classic example of New World Order out of chaos, or New World Order out of crisis, or manufactured crisis, which is the free Mason term for their New World Order, which means from Latin, order out of chaos. They create chaos so they can create a new order. And that's exactly what's going on. And they're doing it economically. They're creating economic chaos, economic confusion, and economic chaos in the US, all across the European Union, in the Asian nations, in the African nations, in the South American nations, Australia, New Zealand, so on and so forth, through their central banks and through their Federal Reserve here in the United States. They're creating economic chaos so that they can, in the words of Christine Lagarde, an occultist and head of the IMF, International Monetary Fund, press the global reboot button of the global financial system. Well, what does that mean? They're gonna put in place a microchip implant where you can't buy or sell without a mark electronically. That way, everything you buy or sell will be taxed. They have then total control of every product or whatever that you're selling or buying. And then they have all your records, so it's the ultimate surveillance mechanism. And at the Bilderberg Group meeting, the globalist elites met, and they want to force you to accept this microchip implant, which could well turn out to be the mark of the beast prophesied in Revelation chapter 13. And I have a whole book on Revelation chapter 13, and an entire book written devoted to helping you understand the mark of the beast. And it's called Are You Ready? You know, I never talk about that book, and I should. I keep forgetting to talk about it. It's called Are You Ready for the Microchip Implant? Are You Ready for the Microchip Implant? And that book you can get at paulmcguire.us. And that entire book is devoted to the technology of the microchip implant. And when I wrote the book, there was legislation passed in the healthcare bill. And if you examine the healthcare bill, I didn't read all, what was it? I don't know how many thousands of pages it was, but I did read, I did read the stuff where they have the microchip implant and then denied it. And look, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a doctor, but you don't need a medical degree and you don't need an engineering degree. If you have a basic knowledge of electronics and electronic communication devices, which I have a basic knowledge of, going back to my early childhood when I had a ham radio and all that stuff, and that's before the cell phone, you know. So, like, when I read the documentation, I'm looking to see if I have a copy of the book in my office. I probably do, but I don't want to leave the mic. But I read the language in question, and they talk about a med chip and a med chip implant, and then in very carefully coded, obscure language, they talk about the med chip implant having an RFID transmitter. So, even though it's put in there with a lot of legal language that's very confusing, it's pretty evident that the healthcare bill makes a provision for a microchip implant with an RFID transmitter. As such, the healthcare bill makes a provision for a microchip implant. And that may be one of the big ways that it is distributed in Europe and the United States and across the world. Because people, need to have their medical records, access their medical insurance, make sure their vaccinations are in order. And I don't want to get into a side thing about vaccinations. I believe that you should take certain vaccinations. And if you're a responsible parent, there are certain vaccinations which you should take. Now, having said that, there are a lot of vaccinations you should not take. You don't want your kid getting polio or something, okay? So you need to take the vaccination. Do they even give a vaccination for polio? I don't know. But there's a lot of vaccinations, and again, I'm going to preface this. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not giving you medical advice. Don't go out and do something because I said it. Check with a medical doctor that you truly trust and truly respect, and talk to he or she about whether you should get a vaccination. So don't blame me if you make a choice in a vaccination and it doesn't work out. Don't blame me because I just told you very clearly you need to check with a medical professional. But you've got to choose the right kind of medical professional. But they laugh when I go into the when I walk into the pharmacy because I'm very outspoken, and I'm friends with everybody in the pharmacy because I make jokes when I walk in because I know they're being treated like slaves. I'm serious. This kind of it's like a side ministry that evolved over the last 20 years. I know in a lot of places that they're treated like dirt. And I know, working in the business world years ago, I know all kinds of things about staffing levels and human resources and all the different parts and organizational structure of a business. And I know what they've done in the last number of years is the major corporations have vastly cut the number of full-time workers so they can save money on health insurance, and they hire only part-time workers. And when you walk into a store in California, like in most places in the country, you're lucky if you can find an employee anymore. I mean, there's certain supermarkets, big name supermarkets. People are so compliant and brainwashed, it's pathetic. They'll stand in line like a bunch of cows for 30 minutes to buy their groceries, and they'll never complain. I'm the only guy who complains. Because I know that their corporation is increasing their profits by making you wait in line longer, because that means the easiest operating cost that they can fix is their employment costs. So if they hire less people, they can save money. It's much harder to save money on food because the prices of food are not as flexible. But you can fire your staff and operate on a skeletal staff and make your customers wait in line. Now, at a certain point, that backfires and people don't shop there anymore, but they'll push it as far as they can. Anyway, I, kid around with them because I realize that they're being, treated like dirt, So anyway, they laugh and make a joke about vaccinations when I come in because they tried to push a vaccination on me, either a cold or a flu vaccination. And it's fine if you want to take it. It's fine if it saves your life. I'm not your doctor. If your doctor tells you should do it, do it. But for me, I'm not taking a flu vaccination. I'm not taking a pneumonia vaccination. I'm taking antioxidants because who knows what they put in those vaccinations? Let's just put it that way. I don't trust the pharmaceutical industry. You do. Good luck to you. I don't see a whole lot of people, they say, well, they live longer. I don't know about that. Anyway, I got an aside issue. Better to buy a bag of oranges and eat oranges constantly with vitamin C. Anyway, that's here nor there. But so the microchip implant is a vehicle to via a med ship to distribute it. Now the other thing is, if there's a pandemic of some kind, an outbreak of some kind, a microchip implant would be a perfect vehicle for letting medical authorities know whether or not you took a vaccine to prohibit, yourself from catching some kind of plague or whatever. All right, so the globalist elite are operating all around the world. They control the media all around the world. They control the currency through the debt slavery system, which I explained in the Prophecy of the Future of America 2016-2017. They are responsible for the wars, illegal immigration, etc., and they control the educational system, the media, and huge facets of society. But the problem has been is that none of these trade deals. Now I remember again full well. This was in 2005. I think my book "Are You Ready," which is still available from our ministry. "Are You Ready" came out, I think, in 2005, and I warned, I shouted from the housetops about the dangers of the North American Union, which was modeled after the European Union. And the North American Union is a fancy way of saying the merger of Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And then finally, the merger of all the North American nations and South American nations. And a lot of leading Republicans were behind that. NAFTA, GATT, WTO, leading Republicans, leading Democrats were behind it, and they all promised us more jobs, more income, more wealth, and this would be the future of global trade, and blah, 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 how this would benefit us. Well, guess what? Just like the lies they told the people in Europe, America lost something like 75,000 manufacturing plants and like, you know, 1 million jobs, outsourcing, America's economy crashed, the income of the middle class and the working class crashed. And so the globalist elite flat out lied to the Europeans, flat out lied to the Americans, and every place where they pull this nonsense, they lie. And don't think for a moment that this is an accident. Oh, they miscalculated. These are bright people. Okay, they have the leading economists in the world on their teams and as acting as consultants. They knew full well what the outcome would be. So they lied. They lied because somebody did make a whole lot of money on these trade treaties. Somebody made a fortune. Certain people got rich beyond belief in Europe and in the United States through the trade treaties. And I warned about this back in my book, Are You Ready, in 2005. The people, you know, I connected it to Bible prophecy because it does connect to Bible prophecy. And all these people would stare at me like they saw a ghost, like, what is he talking about? Well, now they know what I'm talking about because now everybody's talking about trade treaties. So, who got wealthy? The 1%. The elite. The elite have never been wealthier in the world than they are now. The elite in America, the elite in the European Union, the 1% have never been wealthier in the history of mankind than they are now. So yeah, the trade treaties did make a lot of money for some people. They made them richer than you could possibly imagine. But guess what? The trade treaties made some people poorer and poorer. And that was, the trade treaties benefited only 1% of the population, the global elite. And the trade treaties negatively impact the remaining 99%, which is the middle class and the working class. So the globalist elite are not interested in your prosperity. They could care less about your prosperity. And I'm going to take it further than that. These globalist elites are not nice people. You know, the heads of these multinational corporations and the tech companies and all that stuff, they run around and, you know, they're featured in Rolling Stone magazine and Forbes and all these newspapers, you know, the new breed of entrepreneurs and stuff. These new breed of entrepreneurs, you know, the head of the tech companies, the software companies, the computer companies, and some of the, you know, big businesses, they love to run around in their designer blue jeans and their t-shirts and their name brand running shoes, like they're hip, you know, ordinary people. And it's just a branding thing, man. They're just branding themselves to appeal to the youth market. These guys, many of these guys are just as ruthless as the industrialists like Rockefeller when he built the oil, you know, all the oil production, when Rockefeller started buying up all the oil wells in the United States and across the world. When Henry Ford was building cars like the Model T and Model A Ford, when Carnegie was building, manufacturing steel in the United States, these guys were ruthless. Okay, so they were like Scrooges. And the modern version are just as much ruthless. And not only that, I hate to break it to you, but a lot of these people didn't start out, you know, there's this mythology that so many of these tech giants and tech gurus just happened to be tinkering in their garage and they came up with the world's most cutting edge computer and software products. Well, hate to break it to you, but a certain percentage of them were financed by the CIA, And the end game for some of these things was surveillance from the very beginning. You think, I'm not going to name names for obvious reasons, but some of these social media things that you guys use, you think that these are a bunch of nice guys? And you're stupid. I mean, I hate to tell it to you. I don't know what else to say. You're stupid because it's a CIA intelligence front. Now, it can't officially be part of the CIA because that would be illegal. So the name of the game is you have private corporations that work in a very exclusive relationship, let's say, with intelligence agencies to spy on everybody and gather information. So their meteoric rise to financial success was not as spontaneous as you think. So these people are ruthless. They make a fortune. And so when they meet at Bilderberg Group, isn't it interesting? And I have documentation of this in my books. When they meet at Bilderberg Group, they're talking about global surveillance, putting a microchip in everybody. They're talking about this openly. Why? Because they're serious about it. So that's what the globalist elite is all about. And that's why you wonder why. Well, gee, why are all these heads of these huge tech companies and some of these, hip entrepreneurs, why are they all for certain politicians when those politicians appear to be against everything they supposedly stand for? Well, the reason they're for certain politicians is because they're with the politicians that are owned by the globalist elite, because they're owned by the globalist elite. So obviously, there's going to be an alliance between everybody who works for the globalist elite to support the political candidate who is bought and sold by the globalist elite. And that's why there's an all-out attack on Trump, because he's not owned by the globalist elite. And they don't know what to do with him, so they're attacking him 24/7. All right, so let's look at some statistics here that you may find interesting, that will help you understand the globalist elite and the role to transform the world. So I'm looking at my book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, 2016-2017. And I'm going to read you something. Well, let's go to the beginning of the book, where you understand what's really going on, okay? Because you can't understand Bible prophecy unless you understand the money system. And I'm just going to read you a couple of facts, little highlights from the book. And let's begin. Well, let's begin with Chapter 5 of Prophecy of the Future of America, 2016-2017, Following the Money. And I'm just going to read parts of sentences. Bill Gates is often referred to by numerous sources as the richest person living today, only because he's among a list of super billionaires whose wealth is on the public record. He is worth over $80 billion, mostly from being the founder of Microsoft. Now, okay, so we're supposed to believe that Bill Gates is just tinkering in his garage and comes up with Microsoft, which now has earned him $80 billion. And, it was just one hard-working young guy, and it all came together. You believe that? I don't. I hate to tell you, I don't believe it. Then we go back into the 1800s. John D. Rockefeller became one of the wealthiest men in history, but he basically came from nowhere. He amassed a fortune, but there is something very strange about his beginnings. as there is with a significant percentage of the wealthiest people in the world. And there's occultism and black magic in the life of his father, William Avery Rockefeller. Some really strange stuff going on. And then J.P. Morgan, member of the Illuminati, the Rothschild family, the heads of the major banking families and the Illuminati banking families and their creation of the Federal Reserve. And towards the back of the book, A Prophecy of the Future America, 2016-2017, I estimate King Solomon's wealth in the Old Testament at around $500 trillion, maybe more. And that was before he backslid. And yet, you notice that when you read Forbes magazine's list of the wealthiest people in the world, Bill Gates is number one at $80 billion. But the reality of this is, and Forbes magazine is fully aware of that, by the way, is that there are many people in the world today whose fortunes are difficult to calculate because they often hold their monies within their international banking families. But for example, and they're not even on the list of the richest people in the world, and they're far, far more wealthy than Bill Gates and all those people. And that would be families like the Rothschild families and the corporations they control. And some analysts estimate that the worth of the Rothschild families is between $100 and $200 trillion. Well, that makes Bill Gates' fortune a peanuts, but that's never listed. See, it's never listed. So, the international financial elite has done some very dark and devious things. And when we hear that Wall Street is backing this politician or that politician, we have to understand Wall Street is controlled by the international banking elite, the globalist elite. So, let me read you something. WikiLeaks again. I don't know what we would do. I don't know what we would do without WikiLeaks because it appears that the American press is completely dishonest. The mainstream media in America is like uniformly, they're all dishonest. They're all thoroughly corrupt. There's probably a handful of journalists that are honest or relatively honest, but you can just flip the channel and hear liar after liar. And the reason they lie 24/7 is because they're controlled by the international banking elite. And they can pose and pontificate about how intelligent they are and how fair they are and how superior they are. But you know what? Phooey. They're whores. They're whores. They're prostitutes. Because their own people, they're controlled by the 6 globalist elite corporations, control all the mainstream media. They're lying and they're being paid to lie. So then we have an honest news outlet like WikiLeaks, which keeps raiding the secret emails of all governments and political parties and banking institutions. And then we read in the emails provided by WikiLeaks just how really devious, just how much deep collusion and conspiracy is going on behind the scenes. And it just confirms our worst suspicions that these institutions, like the major media in Europe and the United States, are full-time liars. And just about all of them. A few exceptions, but I'm talking about a few. I mean, let's just take one particular person, Brzezinski. I believe she hosts a program with Joe Scarborough. Brzezinski, who hosts a show with Joe Scarborough, I believe she's the daughter of Zbigniew Brzezinski, who is one of the biggest globalist elite leaders in the world. He's the co-founder of the Trilateral Commission with Rockefeller. He's a participant in the Council on Foreign Relations with Rockefeller. He's the man who has been a Secretary of Defense and a Secretary of State with numerous presidents. He's an insider. He's a member of the globalist elite. And he has written numerous books, starting in 1976, The Grand Chessboard, where he openly advocates for the use of psychotronic weapons upon the American public and the public of Europe. Now, let me define for you what psychotronic weapons are. Those are silent sound weapons. The psychotronic weapons are highly advanced, super technological weaponry that most people think doesn't exist. Most people would think if you told them what they can do, you would think it was from science fiction. And Brzezinski is openly advocating in his books that the governments of the world should be using psychotronic weapons on their people to control them, like mind control weapons, breaking down their minds through beams. I mean, authoritarian dictatorship stuff. And yet he's all accepted because of his vast wealth, and his daughter is a television talk show host with Joe Scarborough. And you're telling me this is a woman of ethics? She comes from a gangster family. We're not talking about Al Capone gangsters with the machine guns and stuff. These people drink fine wine. They have they're very educated. Brzezinski's a genius, by the way. He's a genius. If you were to talk to him, I'm sure he would be charming. He's brilliant. He's intelligent. He has an IQ that is off the charts. But he lives in a world that is amoral, beyond morality, according to his own writings. Okay, so I'm reading WikiLeaks. And according to the WikiLeaks, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, plans to cause a major credit event in Greece that will destabilize Europe and then spread to the U.S. WikiLeaks reveals IMF plan to cause a credit event in Greece and destabilize Europe. Okay, so the European, and this is from my book, Prophecy of the Future of America 2016-2017. And I continue to write these words. The European and American and global financial systems are subject to perpetual economic, financial, and social crises that have been predetermined, scripted, deliberate acts according to the secret reports released by WikiLeaks. According to WikiLeaks, this is something the former head of the Bank of England, Mervyn King, admitted recently regarding Europe when he said Europe's economic depression is the result of deliberate policy choices made by the EU elites. According to Durden, it is also what AIG Bank strategist Bernard Colony said back in 2008 when laying out what Europe wants. Then he outlined how the elite will use global issues to extend their power. Now listen carefully to this, okay? And this is for your friends that are in a trance state. And you need to deprogram them from their trance state with facts. Okay, so I'm reading from page 35 of my book. And this is the game plan that the European elites are using to extend their power, according to WikiLeaks. Number one, they're going to use environmental issues, increase control over member countries, advance idea of global governance. So you have to understand that the environment, global warming, is a Trojan horse. Its only real purpose is to increase control over the nations and promote the idea of a global government. Got it? It's a fact. There is no global warming. Terrorism, used as an excuse for greater control over police and judicial issues. Increase extent of terrorism. Now, I want you to pay very close attention to this, because this is the real purpose for these things. The global elites, according to WikiLeaks, based on internal memos that they got their hands on, they state that the global elite and the global banking elite want to use terrorism as an excuse for greater control over police and judicial issues, increase extent of surveillance. Okay, so now let's really get into this. Let's put our thinking caps on, so to speak. I know that's corny, but I can't think of anything better to say. Okay, terrorism. So ask yourself the question: why are all these terrorist attacks happening in the United States? Why are all these heavy-duty terrorist attacks happening all over Europe? Who is gaining from these terrorist attacks? Why would the governmental authorities of the United States and of the European Union, people like Angela Merkel and others, why would they completely disregard the will of their people and open the gates wide to allow in millions, eventually, of militant Islamic male terrorists from nations like Syria? Why? The reason why is not what you're being told. See, you're being lied to because you're being brainwashed. They never tell you the truth. Your Christian friends and the pastors that they go to and the churches they go to and the media and the average man on the street is brainwashed. They're under scientific mind control, just like out of a novel like George Orwell's 1984 or Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. They're brainwashed. They're brainwashed because they're ignorant people. They haven't bothered to educate themselves as to what's really going on. Therefore, they're gullible and they're suckers and they're being played for fools. Right here, we see that the purpose of the environmental issues is to increase control over the individual nations and promote a one world global government. Got it? Has nothing to do with the environment. The reason the United Nations and all these countries are for global warming and all the rest of that stuff has nothing to do with global warming. Now, if there is global warming, it is not due to man-made pollution. That's what the scientists are telling us, but that's being suppressed. The real purpose for talking about global warming incessantly it's a Trojan horse to bring about global government and more control by the elite. Now, terrorism, we're being told that the reason Merkel and the European Union and nations around the world and America, the reason we're being told that the reason we're allowing these terrorists to come in from these terrorist nations like Syria is because it's an act of humanitarianism. It's a Christian-like act to allow these refugees from terrorist nations to come here and find safety and protection. Okay? Now that plays on the heartstrings of all the dumbed-down evangelical pastors and all the dumbed-down evangelical Christians. Sorry for being very blunt today, but you know what? Today sometimes I'm polite and reserved, but today, you know what? I feel like just telling you the truth and not beating around the bush. So please indulge me for a moment. I'm not venting anger, But I'm going to tell you the truth, and it's going to be unvarnished truth. It's going to be straight to the heart truth. And you're going to either handle it and deal with it and spread it to your friends, or you can enter the same hypnotic state that they're in. So they're deliberately playing on the heartstrings of Christians in America who truly do want to do a Christ-like thing. And they're playing on the heartstrings of the liberals who want to see social justice. So by manipulating the sincere emotions of Americans who really want to be compassionate and fair, they have convinced them that if we, the United States, allow in these militant Islamic Muslim males from terrorist nations like Syria, we're doing a compassionate and loving thing. That is not why we're doing it. The truth of why we're doing it, according to the WikiLeaks emails that they were able to get a hold of, is this bringing in of the militant Islamic Syrians, etc., creates terrorism. The more terrorists you bring into your nations, the more shootings at nightclubs, the more trucks are mowing down people, the theater in France, the terrorist firing people with a gun in a shopping mall, and on and on and on it goes. The more militant Islamic people you bring into America or Europe, the more instances of terrorism you're going to have. Now, the agenda is not to be compassionate. Got it? Please understand that. That's the lie. The lie is we're being compassionate. That's not the truth. The truth is we're bringing in the terrorists because, according to WikiLeaks, this gives us an excuse for greater control over police and judicial issues and allows us to increase the extent of surveillance on law-abiding citizens like you and me. It gives them the cover to create a police state. Do you understand the truth? Okay. Now, when we saw all the riots all across America regarding the police shootings, people shooting police, police shooting people, and then black on black crime, and all the massive demonstrations, what we heard over and over again through the globalist elite-controlled media is that we needed more federal government control over the local police. That is the agenda of the riots. The problem is evangelicals are the worst because they know nothing of history. Pastors are even worse than their congregations. They are intellectual pygmies. They know nothing of history. They only know, I don't know what they do know or don't know, but they certainly don't know history. Because history tells us a lesson. And if we know history, then we wouldn't be fooled by what's happening now. Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany did the same thing. He put the police into a no-win situation where they were always looking like they couldn't control things, they couldn't manage the crises, and that gave Hitler the legal cover to federalize the local police, which means in one fell swoop, he made all the police work directly for him like his own private army, and he got rid of local control of the police. Local control of the police is a protective measure against a dictatorship, a military dictatorship. So the purpose of the terrorist acts is to create a crisis. Remember the expression, order out of chaos, manufactured crisis. The demonstrations which involve the police are being used, and every policeman that you know, you should talk to and educate them about this. The purpose of the police, not are being perceived as not managing these crises properly is nothing but a ploy by the federal government to take over the local police. So you get rid of the local control of the police and you make the police an arm or private army of the federal government. That is exactly what Hitler did, if people knew anything about history. That gives the federal government an army, a Nazi-like army to control the people. It's against what our Constitution established, because there's no checks and balances. Now you have a federal government carrying out the will of, if we get a dictator, then the local police become the private army of the dictator instead of supporting freedom. And so that's what this is all about. It has nothing to do with about the black issue or civil rights or any of that stuff. It has to do with federalizing the police, as we read right here in the WikiLeaks document. Then they want to use a global financial crisis. They want to create, the globalist elite want to create a global financial crisis and a one world financial system that gives them total control. They want to create another crisis to force a European Union financial system and then a global financial system. And according to WikiLeaks, the IMF officials said a threat of imminent financial catastrophe or crisis is needed to force other players into accepting IMF measures such as cutting Greek pensions and working conditions, or as Bloomberg called it, considering a plan to cause a credit event in Greece and destabilize Europe. Financial analyst Paul Mason gives a summary. Okay, so what you have to understand here is, Mason continues, quote, "So let me decode. An event is a financial crisis bringing Greece close to default. Just like last year when the banks closed, millions of people faced economic and psychological catastrophe. Only this time the IMF wants to inflict that catastrophe on a nation holding tens of thousands of refugees and a task with one of the most complex and legally dubious international border policing missions in modern history. It is the whole of Europe. In other words, that the IMF is conspiring to hit with the shock doctrine." And then I want to read something else that he said in my book. Mason summarizes, "It proves yet again that the core of the economic doctrine that guides the global elite is the determination not to give a blank about real people." Okay, so these people, according to the WikiLeaks discovery, don't give a blank about real people. And they're willing to plunge Europe and the world into a financial crisis or catastrophe so that they can gain total control of and grab everybody's money and their houses, etc., etc. So, this is in A Prophecy of the Future of America, 2016-2017. I also talk about it, give more information in Mass Awakening, also in the first book of Prophecy of the Future of America, and in The Day of the Dollar Died, of course. And as I've said many times, you cannot understand prophecy unless you understand the money system. And there's some very dark and devious plans going on behind the scenes. Also, in my brand new free DVD set that just came out after the election, so it's up to the minute, it's up to date. We in the brand new 3 DVD series, America, What's Going to Happen Next, which was produced and finished after the election, so it's up to date. I talk about what is now going to happen in America and the world in light of the political events and what stands before us. I really hope you're listening to me. There are 2 futures before us. If we continue down the road of following a Marxist, socialist, godless government educational system, if we continue down the road planned and orchestrated by the globalist elite and follow the lying mainstream media, every American, every European, and everybody, every nation on earth is going to live in an antichrist dictatorship that will eventually flow directly into the real antichrist, the real false prophet, and a one world government, one world religion, and one world economic system. Path number 2 is that we change our ways. We thank God that God has put in a candidate who's willing to buck this evil system. We view that his election is an act of God and recognize that God did not give us the candidate we deserved, but God gave us a candidate based on his mercy, and we stand in the gap. We engage in spiritual warfare. We fast and we pray. We evangelize the lost. We make disciples of all nations. We occupy until he comes, or do business until he comes. And that each one of us, as the Lord has called us to do, each one of us becomes educated, helps to educate others, and participates in the political system, participates in God's mission, and all the people that call themselves Christians who are escaping in La La Land, who are asleep, begin to repent. And if we actively work together to take our nation back, I believe God will give us grace to take our nation back. We can experience, to whatever degree, a biblical revival, a biblical third great awakening. We can reap a last day's soul harvest, and God will give us a reprieve, an extension of time of his blessing and favor, so the gospel can be preached into all the world before he returns. And I believe God wants to do that, but he's waiting on the answer from his people. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. You can get more information by visiting paulmcguire.us. You can take advantage of all the book bundle specials we have. You can get the new 3 DVD set, brand new, just released the other day. It's called America, What's Going to Happen in the future. Or what's going to happen next. I can't remember. I think it's America, What's Going to Happen Next. It's a powerful 3 DVD set, and it's up to the second. And we have book bundles on the other things. Plus, you can archive this. You can listen to this show on technology. You can go into the archives of the Paul McGuire Report, and you can play this show on any technology you like, your cell phone, your laptop, whatever, via iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, RSS, Blueberry, and many other social media apps. And also we have tons of free YouTubes for you to watch. We have lots of free teachings. We have hundreds and hundreds of pages of articles you can read for free. And, we try to give away for free as much as we possibly can. Now, having said that, we also have begun to launch, even though we're in our initial stages, we've begun to launch our Roku channel, and we're going to be broadcasting on many other television channels, plus live streaming. We're gearing up for live streaming of our Paradise Mountain Church services. And we're poised to, we already, even though we're a small ministry, we reach millions of people every month. And we're going to vastly expand that as we move into television. So, if you believe in the message that we are giving out, if you believe in our mission, then I'm asking you to listen to the Lord and obey the Holy Spirit and become a regular monthly prayer partner with us. And say, Paul, I'm willing to be a monthly prayer partner with you in your ministry, through intercessory prayer, through fasting, through petitioning the Lord by simply praying. And I'll do it on a monthly basis many times. I'll pray for you, your family, and the ministry. And I want to thank so many of you that have chosen to do that, because I know for a fact that we wouldn't make 1 inch of progress without your prayers. And then those of you that are obeying the call to be regular monthly partners in terms of your financial gifts and contributions, I thank God for so many of you who have chosen to be faithful in that area. And whether you give $25 or $5,000 or whatever the Lord has blessed you with and whatever the Lord's telling you to do, we thank God for you, because together this enables us to reach people, expand our radio ministry, and we are ready to really launch out with the television ministry. So your gifts are critical at this time period. I get tired of turning on television and seeing either the media lie to me, or there are a number of good Christian TV programs, but there's a number of awful ones. So, there's not much to choose from. And we want to present a prophetic news analysis program that is ministry oriented, but deals with the real issues and helps people connect the dots. So this is a critical time for us financially. And if we can raise the funds that we need to really launch out the Paul McGuire Report program on television, we can reach millions of people, but we still need critical pieces of equipment. You would be surprised. It's weird stuff like a completely different air conditioning system. And that may say, well, what do you need that for? Because with all the studio lights on, that studio would be like 125 degrees, and you can't broadcast in that. You look like you're in a sauna. And extra cameras, a lighting package. This is weird. When we were planning this out, and we did a lot of research, lighting, we didn't figure it would be that much. We figured the most expensive items would be each camera. Well, the basic lighting package we need is $30,000. And this is not, the biggest and top of the line. It's just one that lights properly the set, because if you don't light the set properly, it's not professional. And we really want to make it a professional program. So if God has blessed you in an unusual way, or you're expecting God to bless you in an unusual way, prayerfully consider standing with us. We can reach a lot of people on television. So go to paulmcguire.us, and we have the books there for you too. And there's so many things we want to do on the internet in terms of social media also, and broadcasting content. So join us, sign up for the free e-blast, and visit paulmcguire.us, and together we can change the world. Now, oh, and we have the Paradise Mountain Church services that we have regularly here, and we post them on the paulmcguire.us website, and we have a meeting coming up soon. Now, back to this thing. You saw. I mean, isn't it horrible? I mean, the evil. It's hard to believe that people can be this evil, but they are. And WikiLeaks demonstrated that. Now, this globalist elite that many of your friends, especially Christians, don't want to. They want to think it's just a conspiracy theory. It's not. They have a plan to take over the world, and that plan includes making you a slave. Now, I know what goes through some people's head when I say this. Oh, that's a conspiracy theory. This guy's paranoid. Well, I wish that was the case. I really wish it was the case that it was a conspiracy theory and that I was paranoid. I wish that was the case, but it's not. And I can say that because I've done my homework for 45 years on the topic. The people who criticize me have done their homework. They haven't even done 45 minutes versus my 45 years. In fact, most of them haven't done 45 seconds on the topic. And I can tell you, and I document all the research in my books, that this is real. And we shouldn't be surprised if we're serious students of the Bible. It shouldn't shock us. We should understand that these people are real and they mean business. So how does that function specifically? Well, the primary way of enslaving a mass population, and remember this goes back to the Pharaoh God-King system, which I very carefully outlined in my book, A Prophecy of the Future of America. That's where the original template was put into place. And this original template, which I call the Pharaoh God-King system, and that simply is that you have rulers, a scientific elite, a technocratic elite, rulers who are perceived by the people as being gods. And in some cases, they may be more than mortal men. Plato seemed to indicate that when he talked about the heads of the legendary civilization Atlantis, which he believed was very real, that Atlantis was ruled by 10 philosopher kings, or 10 god kings, which would be synonymous with the scientific elite or the technocratic elite. And that these 10 philosopher kings may very well have had DNA that was godlike, which basically meant that they had fallen angel DNA, which breeded with human female DNA. And this is the primary reason that Jesus Christ wiped out all of the various species of animals, the animal kingdom, and so on and so forth, and all human beings. He totally wiped out in the flood of Noah. Now, God is not into animal cruelty, so the only reason that he wiped out all the animal species was because the animal species had been corrupt. And, like a doctor, the doctor of Island, whatever it is, Dr. Moreau, forgive me, The Island of Dr. Moreau was H.G. Wells' science fiction novel, which talked about genetic engineering with fish and humans and so on and so forth. And so the idea is that the Nephilim were experimenting biologically and genetically, and they need host bodies. Fallen angels need host bodies. Jesus had to cast demons out of people, and the demons cried to be sent into a bunch of pigs, and then the pigs drowned themselves because demons they need a host body in order to function. And so they were experimenting with breeding with animals. And they did breed with human beings and produce the Nephilim or the Rephaim. Jesus referred to this when he said, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. He wasn't just talking about the general wickedness of mankind. He was specifically talking about the corruption of DNA. This is further proved by the fact that Noah and his sons and daughters supposedly had pure DNA when they were on the ark. And that all the animals, 2 by 2, of every species of animals, male and female, the only purpose for that would have been genetic reproduction. The only reason you bring 2 by 2, male and female, into the ark is so they reproduce. And they had intact DNA. And so when the flood subsided, God said to Noah, be fruitful and multiply, which is what he said originally in the book of Genesis regarding creation. Be fruitful and multiply. And also the animals were to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth with pure DNA. So there was a creation reboot, if you will, with pure DNA. Now, this later on, or this concept of what is called the Illuminati bloodline families, of which there is no precise proof that there are Illuminati bloodline families per se. There is a number of researchers who believe that there is Illuminati bloodline families. And that may be true. All I'm saying is we don't have, at least as far as I know, 100% DNA proof that this has happened. But even among the elite today, they openly boast that they only breed within their own family lines. So a lot of the elite will breed, brothers and sisters and so on and so forth, which gives them a propensity for having weird diseases. And the idea is they breed among themselves because they only want to breed among a genetic pool of fallen angel DNA, and that mates with human DNA. And they want to keep this thing. They believe that this is what makes them superior, that they have the DNA of the gods. So there's a lot to this, okay? Now, having said that, the Pharaoh God King system is that you basically create an empire or a society where the Pharaoh or the king, who is supposed to be the genetic offspring of the gods or the fallen angels, if you go farther back in time, he has the right to rule. The people worship him as a god because he's a god king, and they serve him cheerfully as slaves, and they believe it's their divine right and duty to serve him as slaves because, after all, he's a king. And then what they do is they create a civilization around the God King or the Pharaoh God King, in which there's a governmental system and an economic system and a religious system that totally reinforces this belief. And they use it as a total domination and a total control mechanism over the masses. So obviously you give part of your labor to the Pharaoh God King. Obviously you're willing to die for the Pharaoh God King in warfare. And so after the flood of Noah, Babylon came into being, and we had Semiramis and Nimrod. Nimrod was the founder of ancient Babylon and the builder of the Tower of Babel. And he was murdered by his wife Semiramis, and she told the people of Babylon that he had resurrected into the skies and he became Ra, the sun god. And when she was murdered by her son because of various things, his son told the people that his mother, Semiramis, had become like a goddess or a god herself, and she was named names such as Isis, which is originally the wife of Nimrod, Ishtar, Diana, Aphrodite, and many other goddesses throughout time, all stem from Semiramis. So this is the Pharaoh God-King system, and it existed throughout Europe, where you had the divine right of kings. And up until this day, there are speculations and rumors that the royal families of Europe have this different DNA structure, that the descendants of the God Kings. And there's all these legends and mysteries involving that. We do know this, is that they secretly control the world. They're not just figureheads, as we have been taught in public school. They control vast fortunes. So the idea is that the God Kings, in order to preserve their power and control, have developed an economic system based on debt slavery, which makes them have control over the people. And they create an economic system where they print money or coinage from nothing, and they have a debt slavery system, and this is their economic system. They have a religious system in which they are worshipped as God Kings, and then they have a governmental system which enforces all of this through military might. And these are these various civilizations. So when you look at the civilizations in Daniel chapter 9, the great world empires that emerged in world history, you start with the king of Babylon, who, of course, is a god king. You have Egyptian god kings, the Pharaoh god king system, and so on and so forth. And then even when you came to ancient Rome, which Daniel predicted, Caesar was considered a god king. And now in our time, where we see the advent of the revived Roman Empire, don't be surprised if genetic engineering and transhumanist science creates a genetically different or a genetically superior god king to rule the revived Roman Empire, who may come in the form of the Antichrist. So all of these things are important to know, but their control system is based on controlling your mind through sorcery, through magic, through indoctrination, through brainwashing, through the use of drugs, through rituals, chanting, memorization, and through education. These systems are a form of mind control. And so today, across planet Earth, through UNESCO, which Julian Huxley created, a global educational curriculum, which he called Common Core. Both of the Huxley brothers, Aldous Huxley and Julian Huxley, were members of the Dionysus cult, which is the worship of the sun. So things haven't changed all that much. And so mankind, in all the Western civilizations like the European Union and Western nations and nations like America, indoctrination, brainwashing, persuasion, scientific mind control is primarily conducted through public education, through the media, television, film, music, and other media. And these condition and brainwash people into certain sets of beliefs. Now, notice that in our lifetime, there has been a radical change in the belief system. And this was scientifically created by social engineers who used mass media and who used public education to eradicate or destroy Christian thinking or biblical thinking. So now, in just a matter of decades, we no longer have many young children believing that the traditional family consists of a father and a mother, a male, female, in a monogamous marriage. This has been replaced with either same-sex marriages or open marriages of various kinds, or now transgender marriages. The entire belief system has been radically changed. And you can go down the list of ideas and beliefs that have been radically changed through mind control and brainwashing conducted by political Marxists in the school system from the Frankfurt School. And you have also conditioned the masses to believe that the ideal society is a socialist society. And this, of course, is completely false. The ideal society has never been a socialist society. And this is the ultimate sucker punch, because the Illuminati, the occult elite, the scientific dictatorship, the technocratic elite, the God Kings, if you will, going back to the 1800s, carefully planned and mapped out mechanisms that would use our education systems and media to transform the thinking of generations of young people into believing that the ideal system for a society would be a socialist system. Now, we have to remember that the origins of socialism come from Karl Marx, the author of the Communist Manifesto, who taught in a workers' paradise where all the wealth would be redistributed equally, and that there would be no 1%, there would be no upper class, that a very fair state-controlled society, an all-centralized, top-down society would control everything and make sure that nobody had more than anybody else. But it never works. And that's because the actual Communist Manifesto and the entire belief system, which incorporates both communism and Marxism and socialism, because they're really all the same thing. They're just varying degrees of the same system, which is Marxism. Socialism was created by the Illuminati. Communism and Marxism was created by the Illuminati. They published the Illuminati Manifesto about 70 years before the Communist Manifesto was published. And the Communist Manifesto is word for word a copy of the Illuminati Manifesto. And the reason for that is the Illuminati, the scientific elite, very cleverly wanted to develop a total control mechanism to turn mankind into their slaves. And so they had to do it by stealth. And what they did is they created this false belief system that if you got rid of private wealth, capitalism, competition, and you created a socialist or Marxist society, that we would live in a workers' paradise and everything would be equal and fair. But see, this was a stealth operation. The Illuminati and the social engineers knew full well that socialism would not produce a fair and just society. Socialism always produces a system which allows the elite and the scientific dictatorship to have total control over the masses. It allows the elite to make the masses their slaves while they think stupidly that they're being liberated. Going back to Huxley's words, in the truly effective scientific dictatorship, men and women will learn to love their slavery or servitude. That's what socialism is. You watch these millennials demonstrate, and they're like mental zombies. They can't think. They're socialists, and they're not really socialists. They're slaves. And the socialist system was designed by the elite to have total control, total seizure of money, total seizure of property, and it's a slave system. But you con people or brainwash people into thinking it's going to produce a fairer society. So you've got millions of people graduating from universities, high schools, and colleges, all across America and all across the world who truly believe the lie that a communist or socialist society is going to be the fairest kind of society. And that's complete, utter nonsense. Because if you contrast that with the historical facts, which of course the students don't know because the facts are hidden from them through social engineering, you cannot find a single society, without exception, which has undergone a Marxist revolution or a communist revolution or a socialist revolution, which has ever produced a fair society, which has ever produced economic prosperity, which has ever produced an equitable state where everything is redistributed equally and an all-powerful state really does take care of the people fairly. No. There's not a single example of that happening. And the distorted lies that are made using places like Sweden as the examples of where it works is a complete lie, because Sweden is a completely different set of circumstances. So what you have is the exact opposite. Every single socialist society, without exception, produces more poverty and a loss of freedoms, and the state controls and micromanages the people's lives. Every communist society and socialist society and Marxist society produces poverty, suffering. Everybody becomes equal, but they become equally poor. And their education system, they have no freedom of religion, they have no freedom of thought, they have no freedom of speech, they have no freedom of the press. They live under brutal dictatorships most of the time. So it's a lie, and Satan is the father of lies. And the reason it's a lie is because humanism, which is the religion of socialist societies, is based on a lie. Humanists or secular humanists believe the foundational lie that there is no God and man is here by random chance and accident, an evolutionary accident. Man just evolved over hundreds of millions of years. That's a complete biological lie. And when you have a society that is built on the foundation of a complete and total lie, it all goes downhill from there. So communism and socialist societies originate from a lie concerning man's existence. And this is Antichrist in nature. The communist, socialist, Marxist societies, the humanist societies, originate from the spirit of Antichrist, which it means against. It's not the Antichrist, with a capital A. It's the spirit of Antichrist, which is against everything that is Christ-like, including the account of creation. So the spirit of Antichrist is the birthing point for socialist communist societies, and that's why they're totalitarian and evil, because foundationally they're built on a lie. In contrast, Christian societies are built on the truth. Jesus Christ said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me." And Jesus Christ said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." Truth liberates people economically, scientifically, socially, and in every other area. But the elite don't want that. The elite are all about fallen men who are sinners, who want to control, exploit, and use their fellow human being like slaves. And that's where we're headed. We're headed towards a global slavery state, which has another name called the New World Order. The New World Order is based on a lie. And if your friends really understood this, if many of you really grasped this, it would set you free. Because we hear all this nonsensical talk about a new world order. We hear the song by John Lennon, babbling like he was a heroin-addicted fool. Now, don't get me wrong, I was a big fan of John Lennon. I liked his music, I liked his lyrics, and I liked him. But that doesn't mean he wasn't a heroin-addicted fool, because he was a heroin-addicted fool. It wasn't right in the head. He was doped up. So he sang this song, imagine there's no heaven, imagine there's no countries to die for, imagine there's no borders, imagine there's no money, blah, 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 blah. Imagine, imagine, imagine. Yeah, he was doing a lot of imagining because he was high as a kite on heroin. And so he sang this anthem to a new world socialist order. Now, it's interesting that he was raised up as a rock and roll musician, because I believe he was raised up by invisible hands. And he sings the praises of a one world socialist government, which is exactly what the elites want. So, it turns out this dreamer, didn't he call himself a dreamer? He sings the praises of socialism and not owning things and not, hoarding money. Yet when he died, reportedly he was worth in the dollars of his time, it would be considerably more in our time. But when Lenin died tragically after an assassination, he was worth allegedly $500 million. In today's money, he was probably worth, $1 billion. So he was filthy, stinking rich. He didn't imagine there was no money. He had his money in the bank. Completely inconsistent. His life is a lie. And so there we have it. He's singing about an illusion. And this illusion is what the millennials have been brainwashed into believing by their Marxist professors. And the indoctrination of the media and the indoctrination of the entertainment industry and politicians. You see, the reason the politicians are for socialism, don't you find it interesting that the recent election has revealed through the WikiLeaks dumps that all the politicians that were promoting this globalist, socialist government with all these globalist trade deals and all these socialist programs where you redistribute the wealth, that they were all, not only were they atheists, but they were hardcore socialists or Marxists. And yet they all, according to WikiLeaks, maintained very close relationships with the heads of the multinational corporations. And it was the Wall Street financial institutions, and it was the international bankers and the giant financial institutions that bankrolled all the socialist politicians. Isn't it interesting that a capitalist super billionaire named George Soros, who finances hundreds of socialist activist groups, that all these billionaires, all these investment bankers, all these heads of multinational corporations, that they're all the Wall Street guys and girls, they're all bankrolling the socialist candidates who legislate socialist laws. Now, there's something inconsistent there. But then on the other hand, it isn't inconsistent, because the top people in industry and banking and finance understand that the true purpose of socialism is to enslave and dominate and control the people. But the people aren't going to line up and volunteer to be enslaved and controlled. They buy the lie that socialism is going to be fair and they'll have their needs taken care of, and that the government will take care of all of their needs, the medical needs, the employment needs, the retirement needs, and whatever need they have, the all-powerful government will take care of. But the problem is, it never works. It never works. It always fails. And the real reason that the international bankers and the financial elite fund the socialist politicians who push socialist programs is because they understand that socialism is really all about total control of the masses. Totally controlling them, totally control their thinking, totally controlling how long they'll live, etc., etc., etc. Now, what I just shared with you is not a complex thought, by the way. that I shared with you is not complex. I explain it simply and directly in Mass Awakening, in the first book of Prophecy of the Future of America. I explain it in detail in The Day the Dollar Died, where I talk about the 13 international banking families who seized control of the U.S. monetary system, called the Federal Reserve Banking System, which is a private corporation where it is illegal for the government or you and I to know who the banking families are that control the Federal Reserve. And that the Federal Reserve is composed of the international highest level elite occultic bankers like Rothschild, etc. And they control the financial system. And they financed both sides of World War I and both sides of World War II. And they've done a lot of other things, which I talk about in The Day the Dollar Died. Also in my book, Standing Down Goliath, I talk about the fact that the international bankers, the financial elite, the Bush family, remember the Bush family made its original fortune because the grandfather, Bush, was the banker for the Nazis and Adolf Hitler, and they transported the money in and out of Nazi Germany, from Nazi Germany to Wall Street and back. They were Hitler's bankers. Okay, now they're one of the world's elite financial families. Now here's the thing. There's evil and corruption here. And so they are all, and also, by the way, that the majority of the people involved in the international banking families are part of the secret societies or semi-secret societies like Bohemian Grove and Bilderberg Group and so on and so forth. And they are secretly running the world. They are the elite, the occult elite that are running the world. This is not a complex thing. You just have to do a little bit of homework, and my books explain it to you. And then finally, in my book, Standing Down Goliath, I talk about another truth. And I want you to really give me a heads up here and listen to this truth, because I discuss it in the other books also. But in Standing Down Goliath, I kind of focus in on it. The occult elite, remember, it's a genetic DNA occult elite because they believe in the Illuminati bloodline families. They believe in selective breeding and marrying and reproducing within their own family lines so they can preserve their, what they believe is their special DNA code, which comes from fallen angels. They believe this stuff, okay? And then, because they secretly believe they're God kings. See, really, this is so simple, but it's very hard to believe. They really believe they're God kings. They really believe that they're the masters of the world and that they're above morality, and they believe that they have the right to make you slaves, to abuse you, to murder you, or whatever else they want to do with you, because they're God kings. And so they're very into genetics, DNA, and the breeding of what they call a master race or super race. So when Adolf Hitler, see how this all fits together and see why it is imperative, it's super important that you really understand how to connect the dots so you know what's going on, so you're not an ignorant bozo. I know that's unkind, I'm sorry, but I've been talking all day long about stuff I can't talk about. I'm sidetracked because I'm tempted to talk about it, but I can't. All right, so here's the thing. They believe they're genetically superior because they're descendants of the gods, the God kings, the fallen angels, the Illuminati bloodline families. Now, pay close attention. Adolf Hitler created the world's first, and the Nazis, who were all heavily involved in the occult and Satanism, they believed in the science of eugenics, which is breeding a master race of God-men or supermen. That's what the Nazis believed. They believed that the ideal God-man or woman was the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan race. Now, they also, part of the reason they exterminated and killed 8 million people, most of them Jews, but from other races and ethnic backgrounds, is because they believed, among other things, that these were inferior genetic races and they had to be wiped out. So eugenics is you don't breed the inferior races, but you only breed the superior races. So Adolf Hitler ran the world's first DNA dictatorship. So Nazi Germany was a genetic DNA dictatorship that was in the process of breeding, through the science of eugenics, a master race. Where did Adolf Hitler get this idea from? He got his idea from the Rockefeller laboratories and other laboratories in the United States. Remember, the Rockefellers are an elite Illuminati family. And the Rockefeller laboratories, funded laboratories, were doing all kinds of research into the science of eugenics, breeding a master race. And the real purpose behind Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, and the reason why she put the vast majority of her abortion clinics in minority neighborhoods of African Americans or Hispanics, was because she wanted the African American and the Hispanic racial lines not to reproduce. So she put the abortion clinics in their neighborhoods, and she didn't want them to reproduce because she and her secretive elite group believed that the African American races were genetically inferior and that the Hispanic race was genetically inferior. So they wanted their babies aborted, and the abortion clinics were put there. And Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, also was a member of the KKK. You never hear this talked about, but it's true. And she got her ideas, by the way, on eugenics from the Rockefeller laboratories, and Hitler got his ideas on eugenics from the Rockefeller laboratories. So the idea is you breed a race of God-men, or a master race, or a super race, through genetic engineering and the science of eugenics. These are the big open secrets that are relatively easy to find if you do your homework. But if you're going to be like an empty airhead and just accept what they tell you in school, then you're going to end up like a millennial, stumbling around, not knowing why you're demonstrating, and not knowing anything about anything, which is where most of America is mentally right now. We just turn on the television. The average sitcom is written for somebody who has the IQ of somebody in kindergarten. I mean, I know this. I'm being harsh, but I'm just laying the cards, the deck of cards on the table. And you and I have to interact with people who call themselves Christians, who should know more, who should know better. They should do some homework and research. They should study. They should become self-educated and know what the heck's going on. The elite know what's going on. Knowledge is power. And the reason the elite rule over the common man is because the elite have the knowledge about how to maintain their power. Whereas the common man is very much like the average evangelical. He has been dumbed down and has no idea about what's really happening in reality. So I document this stuff in the books because you have to know about it. And it's in all the books, and including A Prophecy of the Future of America 2016-2017. And then in the brand new DVD series, 3 DVD series, which was finished after the election, so it contains the most up-to-date information possible. And the new 3 DVD series is entitled America, What's Happening Next? and we explain what is happening to America, what's going to happen next, what God's people must do. And you can get a copy of the brand new 3 DVD set. It talks about the 2 paths to the future for America right now. And you can get a copy of this brand new DVD, which explains what's going to happen to America after the election, because it was finished after the election, by going to paulmcguire.us, paulmcguire.us, and you can find out about book bundles for research on the other material at paulmcguire.us. We have all kinds of specials. Now, without violating my oath to secrecy, I will say something carefully. Over a period of time, and today, before I recorded this, I'm trying to say this as precisely as I can. I have interacted, that's a good word, with certain individuals in very high level places. And I'll leave it at that. And what the Lord has led me to do is to instruct, advise, counsel, and develop, I'm trying to be very careful with my language, a spiritual strategy regarding the United States of America and the major power centers in America that involve what I have been calling high-level spiritual warfare. Because topographically, we have 2 battlefields. You and I have 2 battlefields. The battlefield of the physical realities like the economic system, the media, politics, science, culture, so on and so forth. That's a very real, or things that are happening like with Russia and Syria and China. That's a very real battlefield, and the topography of that is the physical dimension. But just as real is a more important battlefield that is above, if you will, the physical dimension, which is known as the invisible realm or the spiritual world, where at this very moment there is the most intense spiritual battle going on for the world and for America since the beginning of time. And this is a conflict that involves demons, fallen angels, principalities and powers, territorial spirits of various rankings orchestrated by Lucifer, and they are in open warfare against God and God's highest ranking angels, God's territorial angels, and various rankings of God's angelic armies. Also, both on the devil's side and on God's side, there are rankings of people who have various levels of spiritual power based on their willingness to serve their master. So Lucifer has his high-level people, God has his high-level people, and then the lower-level people on Lucifer's side and the lower-level people on God's side. There's an enormous conflict that happens in the invisible realm and then moves into the physical dimension. And in order to see a transformation, a godly transformation for America, in order for economic recovery to happen, in order for true positive political change to happen, like freedom of religion and many other critical issues, in order for economic recovery and all kinds of things, we're involved in a conflict that you have to become educated about. If you're not educated about it, you're useless. This involves the globalist elite, et cetera, et cetera. So without giving away names and people and situations, let us just say that I've made myself available to help as the Lord opens doors, to instruct on the reality of the spiritual battle and then implement a biblically based level of spiritual warfare that has been demonstrated in the Bible, so that we can see a biblical revival and a biblical third great awakening. And you are a critical part of that program if you are willing to obey your Lord Jesus Christ. Now, if you're not, then you'll be held accountable at the judgment seat of Christ. Because right now, we're at the crossroads for America. God wants to really bless America uniquely so it can be a platform of the gospel for the nations. But the ball's in the court of God's people, and they have to respond with repentance and fasting and prayer and know how to engage in high-level spiritual warfare. If God's people do that, we can see the windows of heaven literally opened over our nation, and things beyond your expectation can happen. This does not reverse Bible prophecy, but it is something that God wants to do, and I'll leave it there. So, I need your help in doing these things. A good part of it is educating people. A huge part of it is getting people up to speed as fast as we possibly can, because the clock is ticking. Believe me, Soros, who's financing all kinds of radical groups, and other billionaires and globalist elite that are financing communist, socialist demonstrators and groups, and they're very high-level people who are highly trained, highly financed, and highly equipped, and whose goal it is to destroy America. Be aware of that. On the other hand, God has his people, but we have to educate God's people, because many of them, because of very bad Bible teaching and very poor leadership, are clueless, and they shouldn't be clueless, about the nature and the reality of the spiritual warfare. So the books I write, our ministry distributes, the film we're making out of the Babylon Code book, the #1 selling prophecy book in the world. We have a couple of mass audience films that will involve people in very high places ready to produce. We're expanding the Paul McGuire program on radio as fast as we can. And absolutely essential is that we have to launch the Paul McGuire Report on television, finish the television studio. We have a Roku channel. We have other channels. We want to do live streaming. And we really want to blanket the nation and the world with completely different kinds of television programming. But I can't proceed without your commitment to be a regular prayer partner, prayer warrior, intercessor, somebody who will fast and pray and knows how to engage in spiritual warfare for me, my family, and our ministry. And then those of you that are willing to obey the call of the Holy Spirit and contribute regular monthly donations or a special gift or contributions that will fund and finance what we're doing. Together, in partnership, we can transform this nation. And that means we can see a change in the spiritual atmosphere of this nation, which will allow the Holy Spirit to reach and bring your children and your grandchildren back to Christ. Yeah, see, there's a malaise over the land, and our children are walking away from the Lord, several generations. But God is on the brink of bringing back your children and your grandchildren back into a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. God is about to move powerfully to restore people's economic situations, because their monies have been plundered by unjust government and programs. And God is not happy with that. And he's gathered your prayers like tears in a bottle, and he's going to move in restoration. But this can't happen without the tide of the spiritual battle being turned. And in order for that to happen, we need to give God's people knowledge. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. And we will take the land together. paulmcguire.us.